The spine's outer sector loomed around Donovan like a decaying jungle of steel and concrete. Towers of rusted metal stretched into the haze-filled sky, their shadows long over crumbled roads and debris-strewn alleys. The air was heavy with the acrid stench of corroded pipes and stagnant water. Sparks flickered from malfunctioning industrial lamps, throwing erratic, dancing shadows across the derelict landscape. Donovan moved swiftly through the chaos, his power armor's servos humming softly with each step. The suit, custom-built for speed and flexibility, hugged his frame like a second skin. Unlike the bulkier models used by frontline troops, Donovan's armor was stripped down, trading heavy plating for agility. Its matte black finish allowed him to blend into the shadows, and its HUD fed him a constant stream of data: atmospheric readouts, terrain scans, and motion detection. The streets below were quiet. Usually, the outer sector buzzed with scavenger activity, gangs stripping metal, arguing over scraps, or taking potshots at the occasional drone patrol. But today, only the distant groans of the spine and the occasional clang of loose metal punctuated the silence. Donovan tightened his grip on his rifle, his sharp eyes scanning the area. Donovan preferred it this way, just him, the ruins, and his instincts. Drones were reliable for routine sweeps, but they were predictable, easy for scavengers to avoid or disable. That's why he broke the schedule, patrolling on foot, throwing off the rhythm of anyone watching. He muttered into his helmet mic, logging his thoughts for later review. Sector 7B dead quiet. Either they're hiding or everyone's packed up and moved. He hopped down from a crumbling walkway onto the cracked asphalt below, his boots hitting the ground with a muted thud. His HUD flagged several abandoned vehicles ahead, their frames stripped bare. Scavengers had been here recently, but their tracks were faint. He crouched by a patch of disturbed dirt, running his gauntleted fingers over the faint imprints. Despite his laid-back demeanor, Donovan was always calculating. His ability to read the terrain, predict patterns, and stay one step ahead made him an effective scout. The spine was his hunting ground, and he knew its ruins like the back of his hand. His internal log recorded every step. The corporation demanded it, though Donovan often saw it as a way to keep himself grounded. He paused at a rusted ventilation shaft, his HUD flagging a faint heat signature inside. It was weak, erratic, like a flickering candle. Another scavenger den, he guessed, making a note to log it later for a drone sweep. As he moved further into the sector, his HUD pinged softly, signaling something unusual, a faint anomaly. A flicker of motion far too quick and fluid to be human. His sensors flagged it as unknown. Donovan stopped in his tracks, scanning the direction of the blip. "That's different," he muttered. He thought it might be a bird. The anomaly had come from an abandoned factory ahead, its massive doors hanging crooked on rusting hinges. It was a labyrinth of towering machinery and shadowy catwalks, a perfect hiding place for scavengers. But something felt off. The tracks he'd been following stopped abruptly outside the entrance, as if the scavengers had either doubled back or vanished entirely, or learned to fly like that bird on his sensors. Donovan's grip on his rifle tightened. His HUD flickered with warnings of degraded signal strength, probably the thick steel walls interfering with the feed. He tapped his helmet, switching to thermal mode, but the interior was a cold void, offering no clear readings. A faint noise reached his ears. It wasn't the creak of metal or the hiss of steam he was used to. It was melodic, a whistle, distant and soft, carried on the still air. It sounded like panpipes, or someone blowing across the top of a mostly empty bottle. His stomach tightened as the sound grew slightly louder, faintly rhythmic. Donovan hesitated, his instincts warring with his training. Something was wrong, but curiosity and duty pushed him forward. His boots echoed softly on the factory floor as he stepped inside, his rifle raised, his sensors scanning every shadow. The whistling stopped, but the silence felt full instead of empty. Donovan whispered into his mic, "Sector 7B. Something's here." not scavengers, investigating. The anomaly blip appeared again on his HUD, closer this time. It was stationary, waiting. Donovan advanced carefully, every step filled with tension, every shadow a potential threat. His pulse quickened, but his hand stayed steady. "Let's see what you are," he whispered, disappearing into the factory's labyrinthine depths. The abandoned warehouse loomed overhead, a skeletal relic of a lost industrial age. Donovan crept through the twisted metal frames of broken machinery, his HUD flickering with intermittent motion alerts. Faint traces of heat signatures ghosted across his visor, but vanished before he could pinpoint them. "Definitely not scavengers," he muttered, his grip tightening on his rifle. The broken concrete crunched under his boots, the sound quickly swallowed by the cavernous structure. As he advanced deeper, his HUD highlighted anomalies. Precise, clean cuts through power conduits and metal beams. The edges gleamed unnaturally under the dim light filtering through the cracked ceiling. "Clean work," Donovan whispered, kneeling to inspect the cuts. "Too clean. Not gang tools." His system flagged them as unknown damage patterns. A faint melodic whistle echoed through the warehouse. Donovan froze, scanning the area with his rifle raised. At first he dismissed it as wind coursing through the rusted beams. But the sound grew louder, its rhythm deliberate, almost curious. "Not wind," he muttered, his voice barely audible. The motion alert blared in his helmet, and his HUD locked onto a shadow shifting across the far wall. A glossy, black shape slid into view. Donovan's breath hitched. The creature was unlike anything he'd ever seen, all angles and edges. It was hard to understand what he was seeing. "Unknown hostile," his HUD displayed, struggling to classify the thing. "Yeah, thanks," he said to himself. It darted toward him with inhuman speed, its limbs carving through the air. Donovan fired instinctively, the rifle's muzzle flash illuminating the darkened space. The bullets struck the creature, sending glowing bioluminescent fluids splattering across the walls. But it didn't slow. The monster twisted mid-lunge, its glossy shell deflecting the brunt of the shots, and darted to Donovan's left flank. "Fast!" Donovan growled, pivoting sharply, his power armor's servos whining under the strain. He fired again, some of the rounds sparking off the creature's shell. The creature lunged, its scalpel limbs slashing at his chest plate. Donovan staggered back, sparks flying as the blades raked against his armor. His HUD blared with proximity warnings. He struck the creature with the butt of his rifle, hitting the creature's head. It recoiled briefly, its black lidless eyes assessed him. Just as Donovan regained his footing, his sensors picked up new movement, multiple signatures, human-sized. "Great," he muttered. A group of scavengers stormed into the warehouse, their weapons raised. They froze at the sight of Donovan and the insectoid locked in combat. "What is that thing?" one of them shouted. "Must be a rogue corporate drone," another replied. Donovan ducked behind a rusted beam as the scavengers opened fire, their bullets ricocheting near him and the bug thing. The creature pivoted, its head tilting toward the new attackers. It moved. The thing leapt into the scavenger group, opening pinpoint wounds. Neck, chest. The others scattered, their shouts filling the air. "Hey, I thought you wanted to play," Donovan shouted over the din. He used the distraction to regroup, his breathing ragged as he reloaded his rifle. The warehouse had become a war zone. The bug darted between scavengers with surgical precision, slashing through armor and flesh alike, their crude weapons and makeshift armor no match for the sharp talons of the beast. "Idiots," Donovan muttered, firing a burst into the creature as it lunged toward another scavenger. The rounds struck its side, most deflected, but some cracked the shell, splattering more of the glowing fluid. Some of the remaining scavengers turned their weapons on him. "Corporate dog," one shouted, firing a salvage shotgun. Donovan ducked, the blast narrowly missing his helmet. "You've got bigger problems, genius," he barked, gesturing toward the thing. The scavengers weren't listening. They focused their fire on Donovan, forcing him to retreat deeper into the warehouse. But the creature continued its methodical dismantling of the scavenger group. One man tried to swing a metal pipe at the creature. The monster caught it mid-swing and neatly severed the man's hand with one blinding swift swipe. Donovan knew he couldn't take them all on. His armor had taken a beating, and he was at his best while moving. The surviving scavengers, wide-eyed and bleeding, scattered in panic. Donovan didn't stick around to see how things turned out. He bolted for the nearest exit, his muscles burning as he climbed over wreckage. Outside, Donovan paused to catch his breath, his armor flashing critical damage warnings. He could still hear the faint whistle, distant but haunting. Unknown, hostile. With no time to dwell, he moved further into the sector, away from the known danger, vowing to make it out alive. The battle had left its mark, but Donovan wasn't finished yet. Donovan sprinted through the ruins, his breathing harsh in the confines of his helmet. His power armor was a bit sluggish, the servos struggling against the strain of battle damage. His HUD was a cascade of warnings. Armor integrity critical. Behind him, the melodic whistle pierced the air, haunting and rhythmic, echoing like a predator's call through the broken labyrinth of the spine's outer sector. It was closer now, almost teasing, as if it knew its prey was weakening. He didn't think he'd lost the thing, but had hoped the scavengers would have lasted a bit longer. Donovan ducked into a narrow alley between two crumbling buildings, his boots crunching on loose debris. The alley was choked with rusted piping and shattered glass, the walls smeared with decades-old graffiti. He slammed his back against a wall, his rifle aimed down the long distance to the start of the alley, his finger tense on the trigger. "Come on," he muttered under his breath, his eyes darting between his HUD's proximity warnings and the darkened corridor ahead. The whistle stopped, and the warnings disappeared. Donovan didn't wait for the ambush. He pushed off the wall and bolted further down the alley, his armor's enhanced speed propelling him over a pile of rubble. Behind him, the whistle resumed, louder now, accompanied by the metallic clink of scalpel-like limbs striking the ground. "Faster," he growled to himself, his muscles burning as he pushed the damaged armor to its limits. The thing emerged from the shadows, glossy black form glinting faintly in the dim light. It moved with terrifying speed. Donovan fired blindly over his shoulder, the rifle's muzzle flash briefly illuminating the creature's frame. The rounds struck its carapace, spraying glowing fluid, but the creature didn't falter. Donovan burst into another derelict factory, the space a maze of rusted machinery and catwalks. His boots clanged against the metal floor as he weaved through the towering structures, his HUD struggling to keep pace with the chaos. He vaulted over a conveyor belt and slid behind a massive press, his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. The whistle echoed through the factory, bouncing off the steel walls. A shadow flickered across his visor. Donovan rolled to the side just as the creature's blade-like limbs slashed through the press, splitting it cleanly in two. He fired a burst at the creature, the round striking its head and sending it skittering back, but only for a moment. It lunged again, its movements fluid like a dancer. Donovan ducked under its swing, his rifle clanging against the metal floor. He grabbed a rusted pipe from the ground and swung it with all his strength, connecting with the creature's side. The impact sent it staggering to its knees, but the pipe was bent and useless. A spiderweb of cracks had opened up on the creature from the impact, green glowing liquid dripping on the ground. Donovan didn't have time to celebrate the small victory. Scooping up his rifle, he turned and ran, weaving through the labyrinth of machinery. The whistle grew erratic, almost frustrated as it followed. He reached a stairwell and descended 2 steps at a time, the creaking structure barely holding under his weight. At the top, he kicked a barrel down the stairs, the clattering noise momentarily distracting the creature. His HUD pinged another warning. Ammunition depleted. "Fantastic. Why didn't you tell me that sooner?" he muttered, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. Donovan emerged onto a catwalk overlooking the factory floor. The wind from the sector's gaping holes howled through the space, tugging at his armor. Below, that thing stalked the shadows, its whistle now a grating screech. He spotted an exit across the room, the glow of faint daylight spilling through the cracks in the wall. Summoning the last of his strength, Donovan sprinted across the catwalk, the metal trembling beneath his feet. The monster leapt onto the catwalk behind him, its scalpel limbs digging into the steel. Donovan glanced back, his teeth clenched as the creature closed the distance. As he reached the exit, Donovan grabbed a fallen girder section and wrenched it free. The catwalk groaned under the strain. He hurled the girder at the insectoid, the impact destabilizing the structure. That part of the catwalk collapsed, sending the creature plummeting to the floor below. Donovan didn't wait to see if it survived. He dove through the exit, landing hard on the cracked pavement outside some 20 feet below. Donovan staggered to his feet, his armor flashing critical damage warnings. His lungs burned with every breath, and his vision swam from exhaustion. The whistle was gone, replaced by the distant groan of the spine. He leaned against a rusted wall, his rifle clutched tightly in his hands. "Sector 7B, he muttered into his helmet mic. "Hostile confirmed. Unknown classification. Send backup." Static greeted him. His comms were down. Donovan straightened, his resolve hardening. "Fine. I'll do it myself." He moved toward the extraction point at top speed, every step a painful reminder of the battle he barely survived.